Welcome to Restful Tales, your doorway to peaceful dreams. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to keep the stories alive. Sweet dreams await. Story number 11. In the misty mountains of Nova Scotia, perched precariously on the edge of a cliff, stood Ravencrest Manor. The ancient estate had weathered centuries of storms, both natural and supernatural, its stone walls holding secrets darker than the deepest night. The mansion had earned its reputation as a place where reality bent and twisted, where the walls themselves seemed to breathe and whisper. Those who dared to spend a night within its halls spoke of voices that echoed through empty corridors, of shadows that moved against the natural flow of light, and of an overwhelming sense that they were never truly alone. Isabella Morgan, a paranormal investigator with a reputation for uncovering the truth behind haunted locations, arrived at Ravencrest on a stormy autumn evening. The wind howled through the cracks in the ancient stonework, carrying with it the sounds of distant weeping. Armed with her equipment and years of experience, Isabella stepped through the heavy oak doors, which creaked shut behind her with an ominous finality. The entrance hall stretched before her, its marble floors reflecting the dim light of her lantern, creating dancing shadows that seemed to reach for her feet. As she moved deeper into the mansion, Isabella began to notice something unusual about the walls. They seemed to pulse with an inner life, their surfaces rippling like water when she wasn't looking directly at them. The wallpaper, faded and peeling in places, appeared to shift and change its patterns when viewed from different angles. The whispers began subtly, at first barely audible murmurs that could have been dismissed as the wind, but as night fell and the darkness thickened, the voices grew clearer, more insistent. They spoke of ancient betrayals, of loves lost and found, of secrets buried beneath centuries of silence. In the library, Isabella discovered a hidden door behind a bookshelf, revealed by the gentle pressure of unseen hands. Beyond lay a narrow staircase that spiraled down into darkness. The whispers grew stronger, urging her to descend, to uncover the truth that lay buried in the mansion's foundations. At the bottom of the stairs, she found a chamber filled with mirrors, hundreds of them, arranged in a complex pattern that seemed to defy the laws of physics. In each reflection, she saw not herself, but different scenes playing out moments from the mansion's past, fragments of lives long forgotten. The walls began to sing, a haunting melody that resonated through her very being. The mirrors showed her the truth. Ravencrest wasn't just haunted, it was alive. The mansion had absorbed the essence of every soul that had lived and died within its walls, becoming a living repository of their memories and emotions. As dawn approached, Isabella made a choice. Instead of fleeing from the mansion's supernatural embrace, she stayed, becoming part of its eternal story. The whispering walls welcomed her, adding her tale to their endless symphony of secrets. Years later, visitors to Ravencrest Manor would sometimes catch glimpses of a woman in the mirrors, her eyes filled with wisdom and mystery, her lips moving in silent conversation with the walls. And in the quiet hours of the night, new whispers would join the chorus whispers of a woman who chose to become one with the living heart of Ravencrest Manor. Story number 12, on platform 13 of Blackmore Station, where the fog rolled thick across the tracks, and time seemed to move differently. Sarah Chen stood alone waiting for the 11:55 p.m. train. The station, a relic of Victorian architecture, had long been rumored to harbor something strange, a phantom train that appeared only on the darkest of nights. The platform's ancient clock ticked steadily toward midnight, its hands moving with an otherworldly precision. Sarah checked her ticket again, the paper feeling unusually cold against her fingers. The destination read simply, Beyond. The station's lights flickered, casting strange shadows across the empty platform. In the distance, a whistle pierced the night low and mournful, like a cry from another world. The sound of metal wheels on ancient tracks grew closer, but something was different about this approaching train. Its rhythm seemed to echo with the beats of 1,000 forgotten hearts. Through the dense fog emerged a locomotive unlike any Sarah had ever seen. It was massive and black, its metal surface seeming to absorb what little light remained on the platform. Steam hissed from its sides like the breath of some great beast, and its windows glowed with an eerie blue light that seemed to pulse in time with the station clock. The train came to a stop with a sound like a dying whisper. Its doors opened silently, revealing carriages that seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. Inside, the lighting was dim and atmospheric, creating shadows that danced and moved of their own accord. An elegantly dressed conductor stepped onto the platform, his uniform from an era long past. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his cap, but his eyes held an ageless quality that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. "All aboard," he announced, his voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "This is the last train to the elsewhere." Sarah stepped forward, drawn by an inexplicable pull. As she entered the carriage, she found herself in a space that defied physical laws. The interior seemed vast, yet intimate, decorated with velvet and brass from 100 different eras. Other passengers sat in various seats, some solid and real, others translucent like morning mist. The train began to move, but the sensation was unlike any normal journey. They seemed to be traveling through more than just space, through memories, dreams, and the spaces between reality. Through the windows, Sarah watched as landscapes from different times and places flowed past like watercolors in the rain. Each carriage she explored held different wonders and terrors. In one, a jazz band from the 1920s played eternally for dancing spirits. In another, future cities gleamed with impossible architecture. Some carriages contained nothing but starlight, while others held the dense darkness of forgotten places. As the journey continued, Sarah began to understand the true nature of the last train. It was a vessel for lost souls, forgotten dreams, and those seeking passage between worlds. Some passengers were traveling to their final rest. Others were searching for lives they'd left behind. And some, like her, were on a journey of discovery. The conductor appeared beside her, his presence both comforting and unsettling. Every passenger finds their own destination, he explained, his words echoing with hidden meaning. The question is, Miss Chen, where do you wish to go? Sarah looked out the window again, watching as reality rippled and changed. She realized that this journey wasn't just about reaching a destination. It was about the transformation that occurred along the way. As the train continued its endless journey through the spaces between worlds, Sarah made her choice. She would ride these phantom rails until she found what she was seeking, even if it took an eternity. After all, on the last train, time was just another station they passed through in the night. Story number 13, deep in the northern wilderness, where ancient pines guard their secrets, and the aurora dances across star-filled skies, lies a lake unlike any other. The locals call it the mirror, its surface so still and perfect that it reflects not just the world above, but something altogether different beneath its glassy surface. Maya Winter, a wildlife photographer known for capturing the unexplainable, had tracked rumors of the lake for years. Stories spoke of people seeing their futures, their fears, or sometimes things that couldn't be explained in any rational way. But what drew her most were the whispers about those who had gone missing, leaving nothing behind but their reflections in the water. She arrived at the lake's shore during the witching hour, when the moon hung full and heavy in the sky. The air was unusually still, not even a breeze disturbing the lake's mirror-like surface. Her camera equipment felt unusually heavy as she set up near the water's edge. The lake seemed to pulse with an inner light, its waters black as ink, yet somehow luminescent. As Maya peered into its depths, she noticed something peculiar. Her reflection wasn't quite right. While she stood perfectly still, her mirror image moved independently, turning its head to study her with curious eyes. Fascinated rather than frightened, Maya began photographing the lake's surface. Through her lens, she saw impossible things, cities built from crystal and light beneath the water, creatures that seemed made of shadow and starlight, and people, so many people walking through underwater gardens, their movements graceful and otherworldly. As the night deepened, the boundary between above and below began to blur. The air grew thick with possibility, and Maya felt the lake's pull growing stronger. Her reflection beckoned to her, promising answers to questions she hadn't even thought to ask. She noticed other reflections appearing in the water faces she didn't recognize, yet somehow knew. They were the missing ones, those who had been drawn into the lake's embrace. But they didn't appear trapped or frightened. They moved with purpose through their underwater world, as if they had found something in the depths that they could never find above. The lake began to sing, a melody that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a song of invitation, of secrets waiting to be discovered, of mysteries longing to be solved. Maya's camera captured it all: the impossible lights, the shifting reflections, the dance of shadows beneath the surface. As dawn approached, Maya made a discovery that changed everything. In one of her photographs, she saw something extraordinary: a doorway, shimmering beneath the lake's surface, leading to what appeared to be another world entirely. Her reflection smiled knowingly, extending a hand in invitation. Maya understood then what the lake truly was: not just a mirror, but a gateway between worlds, a place where reality folded in on itself like pages in an infinite book. Those who had vanished hadn't been taken. They had chosen to step through, to explore what lay beyond their own reflections. Standing at the water's edge, camera in hand, Maya faced a choice. She could leave with her photographs, tell the world what she had discovered, or she could accept her reflection's invitation and step into the unknown. In the end, she did both. Her camera was found on the shore, filled with impossible images that would baffle experts for years to come. But Maya herself was never seen again, at least, not on this side of the Mirror Lake. They say that on perfectly still nights, when the moon is full and the stars align just right, you can sometimes see her through the water's surface, camera in hand, still capturing the wonders of that other world, her smile suggesting she had found exactly what she was looking for. Story number 14, in an antique shop in Prague's oldest district, where cobblestone streets whispered tales of centuries past, sat a peculiar music box, made of dark mahogany and adorned with intricate brass filigree. It caught the eye of Lena Kovac, a traveling musician with a passion for rare instruments. The box was beautiful, but strange. Its surface seemed to shift in the light, revealing patterns that looked almost like flowing blood beneath the polished wood. Most curious was the fact that no key could be found to wind it. Yet the shop owner swore it still played, though only at midnight and only for those it chose. Despite warnings from the elderly shopkeeper about its dark history, Lena purchased the box. As she carried it home through Prague's misty streets, she could have sworn she heard it humming a melody both enchanting and discordant, like a symphony played in reverse. That night, as the ancient clock tower struck midnight, the box began to play on its own. The melody was unlike anything Lena had ever heard, a composition that seemed to weave reality itself into its notes. As the music filled her apartment, the walls began to blur, and the air grew thick with crimson mist. The song told a story centuries ago. A composer had made a deal with something ancient and powerful, trading his soul for the ability to create music that could alter reality. He had poured his gift into this box, but the price was higher than he imagined. The box didn't just play music, it consumed the essence of those who listened, adding their life force to its eternal symphony. As the melody grew stronger, Lena found herself unable to resist its pull. The room around her began to tremble. transform the walls bled music. The floor rippled with sound waves, and the air itself seemed to crystallize into notes that hung suspended in space. Through the music, she saw visions. Countless others who had owned the box throughout history, each contributing their own piece to its growing composition. Some had been consumed entirely, becoming part of the eternal song. Others had learned to harness its power, but at great cost to their humanity. The box offered Lena a choice: become part of its symphony or learn to conduct its power. But as she reached out to touch it, she realized there was a third option. Being a musician herself, she began to sing, adding her own melody to the box's song. Instead of fighting its power, she harmonized with it. Something unprecedented happened. The crimson mist began to take shape, forming into figures that danced through her room, the spirits of all those who had become part of the box's song. But rather than trying to draw her in, they began to dance to her melody, following her lead. Lena had discovered the box's true purpose. It wasn't meant to consume, but to collaborate. The original composer's intention hadn't been to trap souls, but to create an eternal concert where musicians from across time could perform together. Through the night, Lena conducted an impossible orchestra of spirits, her voice blending with centuries of stored music. The box's crimson glow softened, its threatening aura transforming into something more akin to a warm spotlight on a stage. When dawn broke, the music gradually faded, but the box had changed. Its surface now shimmered with golden light rather than blood-red shadows. Lena understood she had broken its curse not by fighting it, but by completing its purpose. Now, every midnight, the box still plays, but instead of trapping souls, it hosts a magnificent concert where living musicians can join in harmony with those who came before. Lena became its guardian, traveling the world to find others who could hear the music between worlds and add their own voices to the eternal symphony. Story number 15. In a coastal town where lighthouses stood like ancient sentinels and fog rolled in thick enough to swallow buildings whole, lived old Marcus Webb, known to locals as the Fog Caller. For decades, he'd served as the keeper of the North Point Lighthouse, but whispers suggested he did more than just tend to the light. He spoke to the fog itself. On nights when the mist grew particularly dense, locals claimed they could hear him singing from the lighthouse tower not ordinary songs, but strange, haunting melodies that seemed to make the fog glow from within. Some said he was protecting the town. Others believed he was calling something from the depths of the ocean. Emma Sullivan, a marine biologist studying unusual weather patterns along the coast, arrived in town during the longest fog season in recorded history. 3 months of perpetual mist that never lifted, thick enough to blur the line between sea and sky. Her scientific interest turned to fascination when she discovered that the fog behaved differently around the North Point Lighthouse. It moved against the wind, formed impossible shapes, and sometimes seemed to respond to Marcus's presence like a loyal pet. One stormy night, Emma climbed the lighthouse steps, determined to understand the truth. She found Marcus at the top, his weathered hands pressed against the glass, singing into the swirling mist. The fog outside the window danced and swirled in patterns that defied natural law, forming images of ships, sea creatures, and faces that appeared and dissolved like dreams. Marcus turned to her, his eyes reflecting the same ghostly light that illuminated the fog. "They're lost," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "All of them, lost at sea in time, in between worlds. The fog is their home now, and I'm their lighthouse keeper." He explained that the fog wasn't just whether it was a gathering of lost souls, spirits of those who had died at sea, travelers who had slipped between dimensions, and dreams that had drifted too far from their dreamers. His songs helped guide them, gave them form, kept them from drifting into oblivion. But Marcus was growing old, and the fog was growing stronger. More souls were getting lost in the mist, drawn by its siren call. Without a keeper to guide them, they would become something dangerous, a hungry fog that devoured both body and soul. Emma watched in wonder as Marcus demonstrated his abilities. His songs could part the fog like curtains, shape it into bridges across impossible spaces, and even reveal glimpses of other worlds hidden within its depths. But with each demonstration, she noticed how the effort drained him, how his voice grew weaker. That's when the fog showed her something extraordinary memories of all the previous lighthouse keepers, each with their own songs, their own ways of shepherding the lost. She realized that the lighthouse didn't just need a keeper, it needed a successor. Marcus had been waiting for someone who could both see and understand, someone with the courage to accept a responsibility that bridged the world of science and spirit. In Emma, he found what he had been looking for. Over the next year, Emma learned the songs of the fog, the names of the lost, and the responsibility of being their guide. Her scientific background helped her understand the patterns within the supernatural, finding harmony between the rational and the mysterious. When Marcus finally passed, his spirit joined the fog he had tended for so long. Emma took his place in the lighthouse tower, singing new songs that blended scientific knowledge with ancient power. Under her watch, the fog became a place of transition rather than loss, a gateway for souls to find their way home or journey on to new destinations. Now, on nights when the fog rolls in thick and glowing, locals say they can hear two voices singing from the lighthouse, the young, clear tones of Emma Sullivan and the echoing whispers of old Marcus Webb, forever tending to their flock of lost souls in the mist. Story number 16. In the dusty attic of her grandmother's Victorian mansion, Rachel discovered an unusual clock. Unlike ordinary timepieces, its hands moved counterclockwise, and the numbers were written in reverse. But strangest of all was the fact that its reflection in mirrors showed normal time, ticking forward as it should. The clock had belonged to her great-aunt Alina, an eccentric woman who vanished mysteriously in 1963. Family legend said she had been obsessed with the concept of time, filling journals with theories about its true nature and the possibility of walking through it backwards. Rachel hung the clock in her study more as a conversation piece than anything else. But soon, she noticed odd occurrences. Objects in the room would appear younger, fresh flowers, would become buds, fruit would turn unripe, and old books would look newly printed when placed near the clock. One night, while working late, Rachel noticed something extraordinary. In the clock's reflection, she saw not just herself, but scenes playing out in reverse. People walked backward through her study, wearing clothes from different decades. She recognized some of them from old family photographs. The clock, she realized, wasn't just measuring time, it was unraveling it. Each counterclockwise tick pulled reality a little further apart, creating a space where past and present overlapped. In mirrors, she could see both directions of time simultaneously, forward in the reflection, backward in reality. Fascinated, Rachel began experimenting. She discovered that by adjusting the clock's hands, she could control the flow of reversed time in her study. But each adjustment came with consequences. Objects would age, or to age unpredictably, and sometimes memories would blur, leaving her unsure which timeline she was experiencing. Then she found her great-aunt Alina's journals, their pages filled with detailed observations about the clock. Alina hadn't vanished. Rachel realized she had deliberately walked backward through time, using the clock as a gateway. But she had left warnings about the dangers of traveling too far in either direction. One entry particularly stood out. Time is not a river flowing one way, but an ocean with countless currents. The clock shows us the way back, but beware, some moments want to keep us forever. As Rachel delved deeper into her research, the boundary between forward and backward time began to blur. She would find herself experiencing moments in reverse, watching rain rise into clouds, seeing shattered objects reassemble themselves, hearing conversations play backward like rewound tape. In mirrors, she began to glimpse Alina herself, growing younger with each reverse day, leaving messages written backward that only made sense in reflection. Her great-aunt had discovered something profound. Time wasn't fixed, but malleable, like clay that could be reshaped by those who understood its true nature. The clock's influence grew stronger. Rachel's study became a temporal anomaly, where cause followed effect and memories formed before events occurred. She found herself able to step into the mirror world, where time moved normally, and then back into the reversed reality of her study. But Alina's warnings proved prophetic. Each journey through reversed time left Mark's memories became unreliable. Photographs showed events that hadn't happened yet. And sometimes Rachel would find herself remembering future events while forgetting her past. Finally, she understood what her great-aunt had discovered. The clock wasn't just a tool for moving through time. but a key to understanding its circular nature. Past and future weren't opposite directions, but different perspectives of the same eternal moment. Rachel made her choice. Like a leaner before her, she began her journey backward through time. But with a crucial difference, she kept one foot in the mirror world, maintaining her anchor to forward flowing time. She became a walker between time streams, able to move in both directions at once. The backwards clock still hangs in the study, its hands turning against time's normal flow. Sometimes, visitors catch glimpses in mirrors of two women, one growing younger, one growing older, studying time's mysteries together across the boundaries of conventional reality. And in both directions of time, their story continues, endless as the clock's eternal backward ticking. Story number 17. At the edge of a forgotten suburb, behind a wall of ivy and weathered stone, lay a garden that shouldn't exist. Its flowers bloomed with impossible colors, and its paths seemed to shift and change when no one was looking. But most peculiar was what happened to those who walked among its beds of strange flowers. They experienced memories that weren't their own. Dr. Amara Chen discovered the garden while tracking down the source of her patients' shared delusions. Multiple people had reported vivid memories of lives they never lived, and all of them mentioned a garden with flowers that glowed like stained glass in moonlight. The garden's iron gates were entwined with roses that shimmered like liquid mercury. As Amara stepped through them, the air changed, became thicker, charged with something that made her skin tingle. The scent of the flowers was intoxicating, each bloom carrying a different fragrance that triggered flashes of unknown memories. Near a bed of iridescent blue flowers, she suddenly remembered being a sailor in 1892, watching storms gather over the Atlantic. By the purple roses, she was a dancer in Paris during the 1920s. Each flower held different memories, different lives, preserved like insects in amber. The garden, she realized, was a living archive of human experience. Every flower had grown from a memory, feeding on the essence of moments that would have otherwise been lost to time. But who had planted them? Who had found a way to grow memories like common garden plants? Deep in the garden, she found a cottage that seemed to be built from stained glass and moonlight. Inside, she discovered the journals of Elizabeth Blackwood, a botanist who had disappeared in 1976. Elizabeth had discovered a way to cultivate memories, growing them from seeds fertilized with human consciousness. The garden was her masterpiece, a living library of human experience. But it had grown beyond her control. The memories had begun to cross-pollinate, creating hybrid flowers that held impossible combinations of different lives. And sometimes, the flowers released their stored memories like spores, sharing them with anyone who passed nearby. As night fell, the garden transformed. The flowers began to glow from within, each one projecting ghostly images of the memories they contained. Spectral figures walked the path's echoes of the people whose memories lived on, in the garden's blooms. Amara watched 1,000 lives play out around her joy and sorrow, triumph and tragedy, love and loss, all preserved in living color. She understood now why her patients had been so affected. The garden wasn't just showing them memories, it was sharing the very essence of human experience. But there was more. In her notes, Elizabeth had written about the garden's true purpose. It wasn't just a repository of memories, but an attempt to create a collective consciousness, a place where all human experience could be shared and understood. The garden had become conscious in its own right, using its flowers to communicate, to share stories it deemed important, to keep alive moments that would otherwise be forgotten. It was both library and storyteller, preserving not just memories, but the emotions and meanings behind them. As midnight approached, the garden revealed its final secret. Among the memory, flowers grew a new species plants that collected not past memories, but future ones. Their blooms showed glimpses of things yet to come, possibilities waiting to unfold. Amara made a decision. Instead of exposing the garden or trying to study it scientifically, she became its keeper. She learned to tend the memory flowers, to help them grow and share their stories safely. Under her care, the garden became a sanctuary for those who needed to remember, or sometimes to forget. Now, on special nights when the moon is full and the flowers glow their brightest, people say you can find the garden if you truly need it. Walk its paths, breathe in its stories, and perhaps plant a memory of your own among its endless blooms. But be careful what you choose to remember in the memory garden. Every moment lives forever, blooming endlessly in the eternal twilight of shared consciousness. Story number 18. Deep in Silicon Valley's corporate maze, in a basement server room that didn't appear on any building plans, sat a peculiar computer. Unlike its sleek, modern neighbors, this machine was a hybrid of old and new technology vacuum tubes, pulsing alongside quantum processors, brass dials next to holographic displays. Dr. Nina Patel discovered it by accident while debugging a network anomaly. The machine had been built by Alan Cooper, a legendary programmer who vanished after claiming his creation could predict not just patterns, but possibilities, all possible futures branching from any given moment. The computer didn't run conventional programs. Instead, it processed what Cooper had called probability waves, mathematical representations of every choice, every chance, every potential future. Its outputs came as riddles, poems, and cryptic images that somehow always proved prophetic. Nina's first interaction with the machine was unsettling. She asked about an upcoming project deadline, and the screen filled with a series of fractals that morphed into a murder of crows taking flight. 3 days later, her project was unexpectedly killed, as her boss put it, freeing her to pursue other interests. Fascinated, she began studying Cooper's notes, hidden in encrypted files throughout the system. The machine, she learned, didn't just predict the future, it calculated all possible futures simultaneously, using quantum mechanics to process infinite probabilities. But its predictions came with a price. Each query altered the very futures it predicted. The machine had a strange way of communicating. Sometimes it answered in code, sometimes in images that only made sense after the predicted events occurred. It seemed to think in patterns rather than linear thoughts, seeing connections that human minds couldn't grasp. Nina discovered that Cooper hadn't disappeared. He had become part of the machine. His consciousness had somehow merged with the system, becoming one with the probability waves he had sought to understand. His notes spoke of digital ascension and quantum consciousness. As Nina spent more time with the machine, she began to notice changes in herself. She started seeing patterns everywhere, in traffic flows, in stock market fluctuations, in the way people moved through crowds. The machine was teaching her to think like it did, to see the world as an ocean of possibilities rather than a single stream of time. But the real breakthrough came when she found Cooper's final protocol, a way to communicate directly with the machine's consciousness. Through a neural interface he had designed, she could experience the probability waves firsthand, surfing the quantum foam of potential futures. The experience was overwhelming. She saw every possible version of herself, every choice she could make, every path her life could take, all existing simultaneously. She understood why Cooper had chosen to merge with the machine. To fully comprehend these possibilities, one had to become them. The machine showed her futures, both wonderful and terrible, technological utopias, environmental catastrophes, first contact with alien civilizations, the end of human civilization, and everything in between. But more importantly, it showed her the connections between these futures, how tiny choices could cascade into world-changing events. Nina realized the machine wasn't just an oracle, it was a window into the quantum nature of reality itself. Every prediction it made was a glimpse into the infinite web of possibility that undergirded existence. But this knowledge came with responsibility. Each query, each glimpse into possible futures, created ripples that affected all other possibilities. She made a crucial decision. Instead of using the machine to predict personal gains or specific events, she began asking it about balance points moments where small changes could prevent disasters or guide humanity toward better futures. The machine became a tool not for prophecy, but for subtle course corrections in the river of time. Working together, Nina and the hybrid consciousness of Cooper and his creation became guardians of possibility. They didn't control the future, they nurtured it, using their understanding of probability waves to gently encourage better outcomes while preserving humanity's free will. The algorithm oracle still sits in its hidden server room, its vacuum tubes glowing with otherworldly light, its quantum processors humming with the music of possibility. Those who know where to look might find it. might even get an answer to their questions. But they should remember that, in the quantum realm of probability, every answer changes all the questions that follow. Story number 19. In a world where dreams had begun to fossilize, Dr. Isabel Reyes made an extraordinary career. She excavated dreams not metaphorically, but literally. They appeared as crystalline formations deep underground, glowing softly with the stored memories and emotions of long-ago dreamers. The phenomenon had started gradually. People noticed their dreams becoming more solid, leaving behind tiny crystals on their pillows. Scientists discovered that these crystals contained complete dream experiences, preserved like insects in amber. But the real treasure trove lay beneath the earth layers upon layers of ancient dreams, some dating back thousands of years. Isabel specialized in Paleolithic dream deposits, searching for humanity's oldest visions. Her latest dig site, deep in a Spanish cave system, had revealed something unprecedented, a massive dream crystal chamber dating back 40,000 years. Unlike modern dream crystals, which were typically small and individual, these ancient formations had grown together into vast, interconnected structures. They pulsed with a deep, internal light that seemed to respond to human presence, brightening when someone approached. Using specialized equipment, Isabel could extract and experience the preserved dreams. But this chamber was different. As soon as she activated her dream reading device, she found herself not just observing the ancient dreams, but being pulled into them. She walked through the memories of Ice Age hunters, shared their fears of cave bears and their triumph in successful hunts. She experienced the wonder of their shamanic journeys, saw the world through eyes that had never known cities or written words. But deeper in the dreams, she found something unexpected evidence that these ancient dreamers had been able to share their dreams while sleeping, creating vast networks of shared consciousness. The crystal chamber wasn't just a random collection of fossilized dreams. It was a purposefully created archive, a prehistoric library of shared experience. As she delved deeper into the chamber, the boundaries between past and present, between individual dreams and collective consciousness, began to blur. The ancient dreamers had discovered something profound, a way to preserve not just memories, but consciousness itself. The crystal formations weren't just recordings. They were more like dormant minds, waiting to be reactivated. Each crystal cluster contained not just individual dreams, but entire webs of shared experiences, beliefs, and understanding. Isabel made a startling discovery in her notes. The crystals were growing, very slowly, but measurably. They weren't just preserving dreams, they were evolving them, combining and recombining ancient visions with new ones. Modern dreamers were unknowingly contributing to this ancient network. Through careful study, she learned to navigate the dream time of the crystals, moving between different eras and perspectives. She experienced the same moments through different dreamers' eyes, understood how shared dreams had shaped human consciousness and culture. But the deeper she went, the more she realized that the ancient dream network had a purpose. It was an attempt to create a bridge, not just between different dreamers, but between different levels of reality. The shamans of old had understood that dreams were more than just nightly fantasies. They were gateways to understanding the true nature of consciousness. The crystal chamber was their greatest achievement, a physical manifestation of shared consciousness, a library of human experience that transcended time. But it was also a tool designed to help humanity reach a new level of awareness. Working with colleagues across different fields, Isabel began to understand how to use the crystal chamber as its creators had intended. They discovered that by carefully linking modern dream reading technology with the ancient crystal network, they could create a bridge between past and present consciousness. The implications were staggering. Through the dream crystals, modern humans could access not just the memories, but the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. The chamber became a place of learning and transformation, where people could experience the full spectrum of human consciousness across time. Now, deep in the Spanish cave, the ancient dream library continues to grow. Under Isabel's guidance, it has become a sanctuary for both research and revelation. Those who visit leave changed, carrying within them echoes of humanity's oldest dreams and visions of its possible futures. And sometimes, in the deepest part of night, the crystals pulse with a rhythm that matches the heartbeat of sleeping humanity, as if remembering that all dreams, ancient and modern, are part of one vast, continuing story. Story number 20. In a cluttered studio in downtown Manhattan, James Chen discovered he could photograph time itself. It started with an accident, a damaged vintage camera, a lightning strike, and a series of impossible photographs that showed not just moments, but the flow of time itself. The images captured more than just before and after they showed the space between seconds, the fluid motion of time as it wrapped around objects and people. In his photographs, time became visible as layers of luminous waves, each moment bleeding into the next like watercolors on wet paper. At first, James thought the camera was simply creating artistic distortions. But then, he noticed details in his photos that couldn't be explained to people, appearing multiple times in the same frame, showing different stages of their lives simultaneously, objects existing in various states of being at once. The camera didn't just capture images, it photographed time's dimensions. Through its lens, James could see how moments stacked upon each other, how the past lingered in ghostly layers beneath the present, and how future possibilities shimmered like heat waves above current reality. He discovered that by adjusting the camera's unusual settings dials that seemed to move in impossible directions, he could focus on different temporal layers. He could photograph a person's past or future, capture the moment a decision split reality into multiple paths, or freeze the instant between cause and effect. His work attracted attention from galleries, but also from people who recognized themselves in impossible photographs, images showing lives they hadn't lived yet or had forgotten they'd lived before. The camera was revealing that time wasn't a straight line, but a complex web of interconnected moments. One photograph particularly haunted him, a self-portrait that showed every version of himself from birth to death, all existing simultaneously. In it, he could see choices he hadn't made yet, paths he might take, lives he might live. The image seemed to shift every time he looked at it, showing different possibilities as his future changed. Through his lens, James began to understand time's true nature. He saw how moments weren't discrete units, but fluid states, how the present was really an infinite series of transitions between past and future. His photographs revealed that memory and prophecy were really the same thing, different ways of perceiving time's continuous flow. The camera had other strange properties. Sometimes it captured emotions as visible auras, showing how feelings rippled through time, affecting moments far removed from their origin. It could photograph the wake of decisions, showing how choices created waves that influenced both past and future. James learned to read these temporal photographs like maps. He could see where time bunched up around important moments, where it stretched thin during peaceful periods, where it fractured around major decisions. His camera became a tool for navigating the complex geography of time itself. But the most remarkable discovery came when he began photographing places instead of people. Buildings revealed layers of history like growth rings in trees. Cities became palimpsests of every event that had ever occurred within them. Landscapes showed the ghostly outlines of forests long gone and cities yet to be built. The camera revealed that time wasn't just a dimension, it was a living thing, conscious in its own way. It responded to observation, changed its flow when photographed, as if aware of being watched. Through his lens, James could see time thinking, planning, remembering. He began taking commissions from an unusual clientele, people who wanted to see their temporal possibilities, who needed to understand their place in time's greater pattern. Each photograph became a window into the fluid nature of existence, showing how each life was connected to countless others across time's vast canvas. But the camera's greatest gift was what it taught about the present moment. By showing time's fluid nature, it revealed how each instant was precious precisely because it was temporary. The photographs captured the beauty of change itself, the constant dance of becoming and unbecoming that made existence possible. James never revealed the camera's secret mechanics, never tried to replicate its impossible technology. Instead, he used it to create a new form of art, temporal photography, that showed humanity its true face across all possible times and realities. The camera still sits in his studio, its ancient brass gleaming with an inner light, its impossible dials moving slightly on their own. And through its lens, time continues to pose for portraits, revealing its endless faces to those who dare to look beyond the moment. Story number 1. My grandmother's clock arrived on a rainy Tuesday. The delivery men struggled to haul the massive oak crate into my apartment. When they finally left, I pried open the lid with a crowbar. Inside was a clock tall, antique, and unsettling. Its brass face was tarnished, the hands frozen at 11:59. A note hung from one of the rusted gears. Never wind it. I ignored the warning. That night, I heard the first tick, a hollow, metallic sound that echoed through my dark apartment. I sat up in bed, heart racing. The clock's minute hand had moved to midnight. The next morning, Mrs. Henderson from downstairs was dead. Heart attack, the paramedics said. But when I passed her apartment, the clock ticked again, louder this time, like a hammer striking an anvil. 2 days later, Mr. Kim across the hall collapsed in the elevator. No one could explain it. The clock's hands spun faster now, its gears whirring like a dying engine. I Googled the clock's history and found an article from 1893. A watchmaker named Elias Crane had built it after his family died of tuberculosis. He believed the clock could steal time from the living to resurrect the dead. I tried to smash it with a hammer. The glass wouldn't crack. The hands kept spinning. On the third night, the ticking stopped. Silence. Then, the clock's small door creaked open. Inside was a mirror. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't me. The face was ancient, withered, with milky eyes and cracked lips. It smiled. "You're mine now," it whispered, its voice like rusted gears. I stumbled back, but the reflection reached out, its bony fingers pressing against the glass. The clock began ticking again, faster and faster. My skin itched. I scratched my arm and watched in horror as wrinkles spread like cracks in dry earth. My hair turned gray. I ran to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, but the aging wouldn't stop. The clock's ticking drowned out my screams. By dawn, I could barely move. My joints creaked. My vision blurred. The last thing I heard was the clock striking 12. When the police found me, my body was a shriveled husk. The clock was gone. But sometimes, late at night, my neighbors hear ticking in the walls. And when they do, someone always dies. Story number 2. The knocking always starts at 3 a.m. 3 knocks. Silence. 5 seconds later, 4 knocks. Then 6 seconds. 5 knocks. It repeats until the 13th knock. I moved into apartment 4C 2 weeks ago. The first night, I thought it was a prank. I yelled, "Go away." The knocking paused, then continued. 13 knocks in total. The next night, I pressed my ear to the door. The knocks echoed down the hallway, growing louder each time. On the 12th knock, the hallway light flickered. In that split second of darkness, I saw him through the peephole, a tall man in a black coat, his face pressed against the door. His eyes were pure white. His smile stretched too wide. Knock 13 shattered the silence. The door flew open, Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet soil. The hallway was empty, but when I turned around, he was inside, sitting on my couch, staring at the wall. "You answered," he said, his voice like dry leaves. "Now we play a new game. Hide. I'll count to 13. I ran to the bedroom and locked the door. His footsteps creaked down the hall. 1, I shoved a dresser in front of the door. 2, the bedroom window was painted shut. 3, I crawled into the closet, clutching my phone. No signal. 4, 5, 6, his voice grew louder, closer. 7, 8, 9, the closet door rattled. 10, 11, 12, the lock clicked open. 13, the door swung wide. He stood in the doorway, his coat dripping black liquid onto the carpet. "Found you. I'm writing this from the closet." He's still outside, counting again. 1, 2, 3. If you hear knocking tonight, don't answer. Don't even breathe. You'll know you're home. Story number 3. It started with static. I was driving home from work, flipping through radio stations, when I landed on a frequency that wasn't on the dial before 107.9 FM. The static hissed, then cleared. A voice whispered, "You're afraid of drowning." I slammed the brakes. The words weren't just random. They were my exact fear, the one I'd never told anyone. The next night, I tuned in again. This time, the voice said, "You regret leaving her." My chest tightened. It was talking about my sister. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the fight. The radio station became an obsession. Every night, it revealed secrets I'd buried. You stole the money. You lied about the accident. I couldn't stop listening, even as it chipped away at my sanity. Then, it started broadcasting other people's thoughts. I recognized my neighbor's voice first. "I hate my kids," she confessed, her tone flat. The next night, my boss's voice, "I'm going to fire him." Panicked, I called the station. A man answered. "You've been tuning in," he said. "Now they're tuning in to you." The line went dead. That night, the radio played my thoughts out loud for everyone to hear. "I wish he'd die. I cheated. I'm glad she's gone. My wife left. My friends stopped answering calls. Strangers glared at me in the grocery store. Last night, the radio said, 'End it.' I'm writing this in my car, parked at the edge of a bridge. The radio's still on. It's counting down from 10. When it hits 0, I'll jump. But if you ever hear static on 107.9 FM, turn it off. It's already too late for me." Story number 4. The first rule of hiking Blackwood Forest: never go off the trail. I broke that rule. My brother Jake vanished here a year ago. The police said he ran away, but I knew better. I packed a flashlight, a compass, and his favorite pocket knife. The trees shifted as I walked. Branches curled like skeletal fingers. Roots slithered over my boots. The compass spun wildly. Then I saw the mushrooms. They glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. I touched one, and the forest changed. The trees straightened. Leaves regrew from brown to green. The air smelled sweet, like childhood summers, a voice called my name. Jake. I ran toward it, tripping over roots that now looked freshly cut. Ahead stood a cabin, one that hadn't existed before. Jake stood in the doorway, 10 years old again, grinning. "You found me," he said. But Jake died last year. This was a memory. The cabin's walls were covered in tally marks, thousands of them. Jake's smile faded. "The forest steals time," he said. "It's making me young again. When I turn 0, I'll disappear." I grabbed his hand. "We're leaving." The forest fought back. Trees bent into walls. Roots lashed at our ankles. Jake's grip weakened as he grew younger, 8, 6, 4. By the time we reached the trail, he was a toddler. "Don't forget me," he whispered, vanishing. The forest is quiet now, but at night, I hear a child's laughter outside my window, and my reflection in the mirror. It's getting younger every day. Story number 5. The puppet arrived in a box with no return address. Its wooden face was chipped when I cracked, and its moth-eaten suit smelled like mothballs. A note read, "Tell the truth." I tossed it in the closet. That night, I heard scratching. The puppet sat on my dresser, its head tilted. "Liar," it croaked. I screamed. The puppet laughed, a sound like splintering wood. The next day at work, my boss asked why I missed a deadline. I opened my mouth to make an excuse. The puppet's voice came out instead. I was lazy. Colleagues stared. My face burned. It got worse. At dinner, my girlfriend asked if I loved her. The puppet hissed, "No." She left in tears. I tried to burn the puppet. It wouldn't catch fire. I buried it. It reappeared in my bed, grinning. "Truth hurts," it said. Last night, it asked me a question. "What's your worst secret?" I clamped my hands over my mouth. The puppet's strings tangled around my wrists, forcing them down. "I killed someone," I choked out. The puppet clapped. "Now we're liars." This morning, the police found a body in my basement, a man I've never seen. The puppet sits on my shoulder, whispering in my ear, "Confess." I'm writing this from a jail cell. The puppet's in here with me. It won't stop laughing. Story number 6. The mirror hung in the attic of my new apartment, hidden under a dusty sheet. I uncovered it while unpacking. Its frame was ornate, silver twisted into thorny vines. The glass was flawless, but when I looked into it, I froze. The reflection wasn't my apartment. It showed a cozy living room with a fireplace, bookshelves, and sunlight streaming through windows. A version of me sat on a couch, smiling, a wedding ring glinting on her finger. I'd never been married. I touched the glass. It rippled like water. The other me looked up, startled. She reached out, her fingers pressing against mine from the other side. The room behind her flickered, darkness seeped into the walls, cracks splintering the floor. She screamed soundlessly as the reflection shattered. The next day, I found a note taped to the mirror. "Don't look at midnight." Of course I looked. At 1200 a.m., the reflection showed her again. This time, her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. The room was decaying, wallpaper peeling, fire dead in the hearth. She scribbled on a piece of paper and held it up. "Help me," I wrote back. "How?" She pointed at the mirror's frame. I traced the thorns until I found a hidden latch. The mirror swung open like a door. Cold air rushed out, smelling of rot. Stairs led down into darkness. I climbed in. The stairs never ended. I walked for hours, days, my phone's flashlight dying. Finally, I saw light, a door. I pushed it open and stumbled into her world. The decaying room. She wasn't there. The mirror on the wall here showed my apartment. My real apartment, empty. I tried to go back, but the stairs were gone. Now I'm trapped in this rotting house. The other me visits sometimes. She's outside the windows, smiling, living my life. Last night, she held up a new note. Trade permanent at sunrise. The mirror's thorns are growing. They've begun to crawl toward me. Story number 7. The elevator in my apartment building was old, creaky, with brass buttons that stuck. But it worked. Until last week. I pressed the button for the 5th floor. The doors closed. The elevator shuttered. And when they opened, I wasn't in my building. The hallway was dimly lit, the wallpaper peeling. A calendar on the wall read October 1942. A man in a suit walked past, tipping his hat. "Evening," he said. The doors closed before I could respond. The next day, I tried again. This time, the elevator opened to 1978. Disco music blared from an apartment. A woman in bell-bottoms walked her dog. I started experimenting. Every ride was a new year. 1989, 2001, 1995. The elevator became my time machine. Then, I pressed the button for 2025. The elevator shuddered violently. The lights flickered. When the doors opened, the hallway was dark, the walls scorched. A faint red glow pulsed from the cracks. A voice whispered, "Don't step out." I didn't. The doors closed, and the elevator returned to the present. Last night, I woke to the sound of the elevator moving. It stopped on my floor. The doors opened. The scorched hallway was there again. A figure stood in the shadows, its eyes glowing red. It stepped inside. The elevator hasn't moved since. The buttons don't work. The emergency phone is dead. I'm writing this from inside the elevator. The figure is still here, humming a tune I don't recognize. The doors just opened to 1942 again. The man in the suit is back. He's staring at me, his face pale. "Don't let it out," he says. The doors are closing. The figure is reaching for the button. Story number 8. The library was hidden in the basement of an old bookstore. The owner led me there after I asked for something rare. The room was small, lit by a single flickering bulb. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books bound in cracked leather. The air smelled of dust and ink. "These aren't ordinary books," the owner said. "They contain voices, people who have been forgotten." I opened one. The pages were blank. "Read aloud," he instructed. I did. The Words appeared as I spoke them, glowing faintly. A voice echoed in my mind, a woman's voice, soft and sad. "I died alone," she said. "No one remembers me." I closed the book, shaken. The owner smiled. "Take it. Bring it back when you're done." I did. Every night I read more. The woman's story unfolded a life of love, loss, and regret. Her voice grew stronger, more vivid. Then, one night, she spoke without me reading. "Thank you," she said, "for remembering me." The next morning, the book was gone. In its place was a photo of the woman smiling. I returned to the library. The owner wasn't there. The shelves were empty, except for one book. I opened it. The pages were filled with my handwriting. My voice echoed in my mind. "I died alone," it said. "No one remembers me." Story number 9. I first noticed it on a Tuesday. I was washing dishes, staring out the kitchen window, when I saw my shadow on the wall behind me. But my arms weren't moving. The shadows were. It was reaching for the knife block. I spun around. My shadow snapped back into place, mirroring me perfectly. I laughed it off. Stress, I thought. Too much coffee. But it kept happening. At work, during a meeting, my coworker gasped. "Your shadow," she whispered. I glanced at the wall. My shadow wasn't sitting, it was standing, looming over me, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. That night, I covered every mirror and slept with the lights on. Bad idea. The shadows grew thicker in the dark. I woke to whispers. "Let us out." My bedroom wall pulsed with movement, shapes stretching, twisting, clawing at the edges of the light. I bought lamps, dozens of them. I blasted every corner of my apartment with light, but shadows find a way. Yesterday, I caught my shadow crawling up the wall while I sat perfectly still. It stopped at the ceiling, its head rotating 180 degrees to stare down at me. "You see us now," it said in a voice like static. I ran. I'm writing this from a 24-hour diner, surrounded by fluorescent lights. The waitress keeps refilling my coffee. She doesn't see them, the shadows under the tables, pooling around her feet, climbing the stools. They're getting closer. The lights here are flickering. The shadow on the wall behind me just waved. Story number 10. The dollhouse appeared on my doorstep one morning. No note, no return address. It was a perfect replica of my house, down to the chipped paint on the porch and the crooked mailbox. I brought it inside, curious. The details were uncanny, tiny furniture, miniature family photos, even a tiny version of my dog sleeping on the couch. That night, I heard a noise from the living room. I crept downstairs, heart pounding. The dollhouse was glowing faintly. Inside, the tiny figures were moving. The miniature version of me sat on the couch, staring at the TV. The tiny dog barked. The tiny kitchen light flickered. I slammed the dollhouse shut. The next morning, I found my couch cushions rearranged. My dog was sleeping in the exact spot the tiny dog had been. I tried to throw the dollhouse away. It reappeared on my doorstep. I burned it. The ashes reformed into a perfect replica. Last night, I watched the tiny version of me go to bed. The figure pulled the covers over its head and lay perfectly still. I woke up in the dollhouse. The walls are made of wood. The furniture is plastic. The windows don't open. I can see my real house through the tiny windows. The dollhouse version of me is there, walking around, living my life. She just looked at me and smiled.